of all the events that you've had while you've been in some of these countries, I know you've had some kidnapping experiences.
Oh, yeah.
What is your, or I guess you could talk about those, and then also what is your like scariest moment been where you're like, oh shoot, like I went too far this time. I think I'm not coming back from this one.
Yeah, there's definitely been some of that. So the first sort of kidnapping was I was in Mexico. I was 20 years old. I'm 44 now. I was 20 years old. Sort of pre-cell phone area. I lived in a really crappy area of Mexico City up on the hill. And so Mexico City is like a bowl. In the middle is the center of town, and it's like the lowest part of the bowl. And the further you go up, the kind of crappier it gets after a while, and then you're outside the city. So I lived on someone's roof, essentially, in like this barrio kind of place that didn't have mass transit. And you get around by using these school buses that have like giant airbrushed murals of Mariah Carey on the side or something like that, and you pay them 10 pesos and they take you down the hill. I was going out with a friend of mine, and I was like, I'm going to take a taxi because I don't want to sit on this bus and like stop everywhere and take forever. I'm running late. So I get in a green Volkswagen Bug, which is Mexico City taxi, sort of trademark. They're from the 60s. I get in. I'm like, oh crap, I don't have any cash. I only have my cards. So I tell the driver, I'm like, hey, I got to go to an ATM. I only have my cards. And he's like, no problem. But then we're driving kind of further away from the city, not closer. And I was like, hey, why are you not going to where I'm going? He's like, no, we are. And I was just like, okay, but I've lived here for like 2 months. We're not going there. He's like, yeah. And I was like, if he'd said accident or traffic jam, I would have, but I'm like, And then he's like, I need to ask for directions. And I was like, okay, this is wrong, because this is like going to Washington, D.C. and you're like, take me to the White House. And the driver's like, oh, geez, I need directions. I'm going to the middle of Mexico City. I'm going to the presidential palace and getting out and walking. You don't know where that is. You're not a real taxi driver. So what's going on? And luckily, this is pre-cell phone area for a couple of reasons. One, I wasn't like farting around on Instagram, not looking at where I was going until the end. Two, he couldn't call anyone to prep anyone for my arrival, which is kind of what I suspected he would have done in today's modern era. So he stops at red lights, and I'm like trying to get out, but the door won't open. I'm like, unlock the door and let me out. And he's like, no, we're almost there. I was like, well, that's certainly not true. And then he stops in front of this really crappy, sort of unfinished cinder blockish looking.
Were you in like rural areas, or was he driving
rural,
through like
but
kind
like
of
bad areas of town,
okay.
like people
like
building
away
their
from
own
downtown
right.
government palace?
People building their own homes out of cinder blocks now on land that they maybe don't own, area of town. I'm like, okay, this is in like unlit. It's like, oh, this is not good. So he stops in front of this like crappy unfinished house, and I'm like, all right, this is the part where there's guys in there that come into the car or drag me out or whatever. I'm like, let me go, man. I'll pay you. He's like, I thought you said you didn't have any cash. And I was like, oh, now I'm definitely being kidnapped for ransom, because that was like kind of the tell. So at this point, I'm 20 years old. I'm eating carne asada every day, and I'm going to the gym twice a day because I'm bored and I have nothing else to do, and I'm basically on vacation and learning Spanish. This is a 50-plus-year-old cab driver who's eating quesadillas every day and sitting on his ass for 12 hours driving. So I slid behind him. I was like sort of catty-corner from him before. I slid behind him, and I put my arm between him and the door. I was like, don't get out. Keep driving. Because I knew if he just drove me anywhere else, he has way less of an advantage against me. So he's like, relax. He's like trying to calm me down. And I'm like, no, drive me somewhere else. He's like, where? I'm like, anywhere but here, pal, like anywhere. And he's like, okay, calmate, right? And then he makes a fast move for the door, but he doesn't know I got my arm between him and the door. So he tries to go for the door. Door doesn't open because I pull him back into the seat as hard as I can. And I put my forearm over the bridge of his nose, and I squeeze with my other forearm. And I'm stronger than him by a lot. And there's a seat between us, so it's hard to do this particular thing. It's a lot easier if the back of their head is right on your chest. But I can squeeze hard enough. And this seat was not that soft because it was from like a 60s ancient VW Bug seat. And I'm squeezing until just he stops moving. And then I try to open his door. I do. I have to crawl between the seats because my door won't open, push his now lifeless body out of the car, try to drive a stick shift from 1965, can't do it, end up taking the keys out and chucking the keys. I should have kept the keys, whatever, but I chucked the keys, and I'm like, all right. And I just start running back the way that we came for as long as I can, wearing like Banana Republic chinos and a button-down shirt. And surprisingly, when I get to a main road, no one will stop for the sweaty gringo on the side of the road who's like jumping down, up and down and screaming. Finally, a car stops with a man and a girl that I thought was his daughter, but probably was his girlfriend, 2020 hindsight. And he's like, I'm a doctor. Are you okay? And I was like, no, get me out of here. And he's like, I'm not like putting you in my car, man. I was like, I'll ride in the trunk. This guy got kidnapped. I got to get out of here. And I think me telling him I got kidnapped and I'll ride in the trunk was kind of like the selling point. He didn't make me ride in the trunk. He puts me in the back of the car. The daughter or the girl or whatever was like, you can't just leave him here, you know? Because I had like dyed blonde hair. I was clearly not Mexican. And I was in the middle of nowhere. Like this, it was quite believable that I did not end up in this particular place by my design. And he's like, what happened? I tell him and he's like, oh, okay. Where do you want to go? I'm like, to police. And he's like, let me tell you why this is a really bad idea. You just told me you might have killed a cabbie. Are you sure he's okay? No. Police, good chance they're in on whatever racket this is. If they're kidnapping you for ransom, the police might know about it. For all we know, that guy was a cop. For all we know, he took you to a police officer's house and those guys are still there. You could go to the police. He's like, there's a world where you go to the police and they just bring you back here. Or you're in trouble for whatever you did to that cab driver because it's your word against this body they found in the middle of nowhere that you just confessed to, you know, maybe murdering. So I was like, oh, he's like, I was like, just take me home. He's like, I don't really even want to know where that is. I'm going to put you at a metro station. I was like, that works. So he dropped me off at a metro station and I ended up going back to the place where I lived, packed all my stuff at like now, 2 o'clock in the morning and caught, I think like a 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning bus to another town. And I ended up calling and leaving a note for the family that I lived with. And I was like, had to move to Guadalajara. Thanks for everything. Bye. And they called me and they were like, ¿Por qué? And I was like, here's what happened. And one of the gals that lived in that house, the younger one, she worked at the presidential palace. And I was like, can you sort of like, is there a computer you can check? And she's like, I'll ask around, but I don't want to make too much noise about this because they're going to wonder how I know about this random thing that happened if the guy isn't alive. And then it's going to all come crashing down. But I checked years later and I'm not in the computer. So I think the guy probably woke up on the sidewalk and was like, oh, crap. Okay, wrong gringo, oops. 2020 hindsight, I don't think they were going to chop me up and put me into little pieces or whatever, and they probably weren't going to hold me for ransom. What they were probably going to do is put some muscly dudes in the car with knives or guns and go take me to every ATM until my card stops working and then just throw me back out on the street. Yeah. But that's like kind of best case scenario. And I wasn't going to roll the dice on that one. So that was the first sort of scary experience. And the moral of the story is pay attention when you're in unfamiliar surroundings. Don't get your phone out and go on Instagram. Because I really think if I would my brain did a lot of, I couldn't be getting kidnapped. That's never happened to me before because your brain looks for familiar experiences, right? But the problem with that is unless you get kidnapped routinely, you're not going to have a familiar experience to fall back on. So you're going to start to rationalize why this is happening to you. There's a guy named Gavin DeBecker who I had on the show. And he wrote a book called The Gift of Fear. A lot of people fear, they have fear and then they go, oh, well, that's unlikely. That's probably not going to happen. A lot of the examples are like women who feel like the guy behind them is being weird, but they can't put their finger on it. And they're like, I'm just being unfair. I'm profiling, or I need to stop being so scared of everything. And then it turns out the guy's like a serial killer or, a rapist or something like that. And there's all these little things that our brains pick up on, sort of Malcolm Gladwell blink kind of stuff that you don't necessarily notice and that instill fear. And that fear is evolved and it's really sharp. It doesn't mean you're right all the time, but you can blunt it severely by ignoring things like people will call it intuition, but it's really just fear response. Or they'll get out their phone and they'll go, this is ridiculous. Let's see what my friends are up to on their trip to Mexico, right? And you're flipping through this thing and you're not looking out the window going, why are we driving further away from my destination? Well, that's an uncomfortable feeling. I don't want to deal with that feeling. Let me just check my email. So when you get that uncomfortable feeling, it doesn't mean you're right all the time, but you should definitely investigate what's going on there. Because I had no choice but to investigate. And my brain was still like, come on, man, you're getting kidnapped. Why would you get kidnapped by a taxi driver? That doesn't make any sense. You don't have any money. What are they going to do? Oh, there's a lot of really bad things they could do. Yeah, if you've been watching too many movies, Jordan, they're not going to chop you up into little pieces. I mean, that's what was going on in my brain.
How long? Because I can't even imagine the mental state of like being dropped at the metro station. I'd probably feel like so exposed and like vulnerable. You've got to go back and pack your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a massive adrenaline dump.
How long did it take for your like system to resettle where like you were sleeping? Like, did it affect your sleep or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, even when I moved, I remember several days being like, because the bus ride is really long from Mexico City to Guadalajara. It was really long. And I remember being like, I'm going to sleep on the bus. Didn't happen. I remember getting to a place, finding a place to stay, a hotel, couldn't go to sleep. Bought a bunch of marijuana, smoked it thinking that would help. Couldn't go to sleep. Spent the whole next day awake. Passed out like at probably 6 or 7 p.m. And I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm so tired. I woke up at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't go to sleep. So there were weeks where my sleep was totally screwed up. Like I couldn't, it was awful. I didn't realize at the time, oh, I'm having a trauma response from a traumatic experience. I was just like, man, I'm really stressed out because of this thing that I shouldn't even be worrying about anymore. But because you're 20, you don't have a frame of reference for like, that was super screwed up and I should fly home and like go see the counselor.
A therapist immediately, yeah.
Exactly.
Or find a shaman.
Yeah, yes, find a shaman and do some ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca, there you go. That's the real trip. So then how did that first experience of kidnapping help you in any way with your second experience of kidnapping?
So this is 4 years later, totally different set of circumstances. I was at a really big concert in Serbia, and I hadn't been checking in regularly with the police. Speaking of authoritarian regimes, one of the things you have to do when you're there, if you're foreign, you have to go to the police, show them your passport, tell them where you're living, why you're there, how long you're going to be there, all these things. You have to do it with the cops. If you go to a hotel, they fill out forms and they take your passport. At the hotel, you don't get to keep it, and they do this for you. But I was living with Serbians, and they like want to know where you're living at all times. And I just thought that was un-American, damn it. I'm not going to suffer this bullshit. But also one of the times where I did it, I went to Austria and I came back and they were like, oh, it's 11 p.m., yeah, we're not going to be able to handle this right now, even though I'd been there for like 2 hours. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And they're like, well, actually, you can't leave because you didn't register. I'm like, yeah, but you said you couldn't do it. And they're like, no, you're going to spend the night in this jail cell with these Roma prostitutes who are chain smoking and talking really loudly all night long with their pimp or whatever. And I was like, are you kidding? I have work tomorrow. What the fuck is this? Probably not allowed to say that. Sorry. What the hell is this? So I was like really pissed off. And I spent the one of the worst nights of my life in this jail cell, inhaling secondhand smoke and watching my lifespan decrease or whatever by dealing with this. And so I was like, I'm never registering with the police again. These guys are just authoritarian pricks. I'm over it. What are you going to do? Well, what they were going to do is find out where I was supposed to be living, go there, see that I didn't have any of my stuff there, tell my friend, hey, you registered this guy and he doesn't live there. That's a crime. And she's like, you got to move ASAP. So then I told them I was somewhere else, that I wasn't, and like had all these different issues. So they were basically kind of like looking for me, and the state security guys who are like their version of the FBI are often not well-trained, educated FBI-ish type people. They're ex-militia pricks from Bosnia who raped and murdered a bunch of ethnic Croats before losing the war and getting pushed out, or were also in some kind of militia and they got their asses kicked by Bosnians or Croats or whatever it was, and then now they have like damage. So these guys were like super high and drunk at 8 o'clock in the morning driving, and this is the quality of agent we're dealing with. They're like fat idiots, just dumb buffoons. And they're like, you're under arrest. And I don't know if they didn't pick me because they like had my photo. They were just harassing random women. And we were with a bunch of women. And I was like, this is like going to be bad for the girls. And so my friend and I kind of like, I won't say we volunteered to get arrested, but that's what ended up happening, because we were like, girls, run, and we'll just like deal with these guys. So the girls sort of like moseyed off and then sprinted away, and the guys were really pissed off that we let the girls get away because they were going to do something to the girls. And they were like, get in the car. And I remember one of the things they said was, no, not in the car. So when you learn a language, one of the things that's hard is, what are they called? Like position, the in, on, at, Forget what those words
Things
are.
like articles or things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Syntax.
Yeah.
So they're like, get in the car. And I'm like, okay. And I go to get in the car and I can see like guns in the back seat. And they're like, no, get in the car, not in the car. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? And he's like, stand on the side of the car. I was like, oh, they mean get on the car, like not in the car. They want me to stand on the running boards of the car and hold on to the sunroof outside of the vehicle while they drive. And I was like, well, this is really unsafe, but we're going like 5 miles an hour on dirt, an island with no traffic. So like, whatever. Then they drive off that and they get on the road. And then he's like handing me a beer out the sunroof. And I'm like, okay, either this is going to be like a really great, awesome experience or it's all going to go downhill at some point. And my friend's with me who speaks fluent Serbian. And I was like, don't tell them that I understand Serbian and don't tell them that you understand Serbian. So we were like, the guys were just kind of like, we're drinking beers and like bikers are honking at us. And like, I'm like, this is going to be, they're going to let us go, right? Because they're just like kooky, drunk idiots. Well, then the police try to pull us over and they just wave out their window and the police are like, oh, okay. And I'm like, uh-oh. I thought the police were going to be like, what are you doing? And we're like, these guys kidnapped us. And they're going to be like, knock it off. No. They were just like, hey, we're state security. Go away. So the traffic cops just like turn their lights off and just stop following us. And I was like, oh, that's a bad sign. These guys have more authority than the regular police.
Did you realize that when they
I didn't really, it wasn't super familiar with like this state security situation.
Yeah.
I just thought like, I mean, I guess I didn't really know. I thought like they still have to pull over. If you're in the FBI and the police try to pull you over, I'm sure you pull over and explain that you're FBI and show your ID. And the guy who's standing on the running boards of the car with a beer gets to be like, hey man, this is not a kosher situation. They don't just get to go like, no thanks, we're not pulling over. I'm going to give you a hand gesture and you're going to run the license plate and find out it's a government vehicle and just be like, oh, well, we don't have any authority. Like that's weird. And that's dictatorship stuff. Mm-hmm. That's authoritarian regime stuff. So then I'm like, oh God, this is ugly. And they pull into this neighborhood and we go into this like shut house. And inside the house, there's a bar and there's a bartender. And the bartender's like, it's okay. And I was like, okay, but you told me that without me prompting you. So that makes me think that this isn't okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You're like, well, now I'm
extra worried. Yeah. And I remember the bartender like gave us like cigarettes and he was like, gave us like soft drinks. And the guys we were with was like, no, give them rakia, which is like this really hard plum brandy kind of stuff. And then the guys go, give them rakia and give us water and keep pouring it. And they're going to get really drunk and we're going to interrogate them. And I was like, okay, I understand fully what's going on. So I was like, can I have a bottle of water? And the bartender was like, sure. So I slammed this bottle of water and I leave a little bit. And I was like, oh, I'm so thirsty. And I keep going to the bathroom and filling up the water. Sorry, I screwed this up. I keep spitting some of the rakia in, looking like I'm chasing it with the water. And then I go to the bathroom, dump out the water, refill the bottle with regular water, and I keep drinking the water, but also spitting the rakia back in. So there's this like water rakia mixture.
Is rakia clear, I'm assuming?
It's clear, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's, maybe a little bit off, but these guys are, one, idiots,
Drunk.
and two, yeah, they can't really tell and they're already drunk. So I'm getting drunker, but not like wasted.
Was your friend getting?
My friend was getting completely fucking hammered. Yeah. Completely hammered. Yeah. So he gets like so drunk he can like barely move. And then they're like, okay. And I'm like, oh, I need to sort of like pretend that I'm also in that state because it's going to be pretty weird when we have 20 shots. And I'm like, okay, let's go.
Like, what's next?
And my friend can't like move, right? That's going to be very weird. So they take us downstairs and I can hear my friend getting his ass beat like hard, like really, really bad. And it's not just that he's screaming and grunting, but you can hear him getting slammed on things. And the room they brought me into, the bartender had left by this point, and I was like, oh God, this is not good. The room they brought me into was like an empty basement-ish room with like rusty pipes sticking out of the wall where there used to be a sink and like a car battery in the corner. And I'm like, oh, that's not here for storage. That's like a thing they hook up to you or something. And there's like low windows and a chair and like some like rags. And I'm just like, this is not a place.
Are you thinking like
be.
Escape? Like what are you like mentally prepping for as you're walking into the room?
I'm thinking I'm going to get my ass beat, possibly tortured and or killed in this place. Also, my friend is in dire straits, but I have to figure out a way out of here. And they were asking me a lot of questions to try and get answers, but they weren't strategic about it in any sort of intelligent way. They would say things like, you're a spy. And I'd go, what do you think I'm looking for? And they're like, no, you're supposed to just admit that you're a spy. And I'm like, okay, but what do you think I'm looking for? And they're like, we don't know. You tell us. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a teacher, and I'm here on this government fellowship, and your government approved it, and your government knows I'm here. And they're like, why are you running from the police? And I was like, I'm not running from the police. Like, you are running from the police. You want us to beat your ass? And I was like, no, who would want you to beat their ass? That doesn't make any sense. And I just kept doing stuff like this, and they were getting so frustrated, and they were hitting me, but they were like, no, this is not like that. You know, like I was answering their questions, but in a way that they were just like getting kind of annoyed and frustrated. Not angry. I don't want them angry. I want them confused. And so I just kept doing things like that. And they were like, you want to bring our country down. And I was like, I really like the food here. I really like the food. Where should I go eat after this? And they're like, I don't think you understand. You're not getting out of here. And I'm like, yeah, but after this, I really feel like eating a pleskovica, which is like this like stuffed burger thing. And they were just like, you're not getting out of here. This is the end for you. And I'm like, do you prefer this place or that place? And they're just like, you're taking control of the conversation. They were getting frustrated, but it wasn't like in a smart ass way. I'm really just genuinely asking these questions. And they'd be like, you probably hear taking advantage of the women. And I'd be like, oh, no, you know, I have a girlfriend. She's super lovely. She used to live in the United States. She got pushed out of her home because she used to live in Bosnia, because I figured that's where these guys were from. And they're like, she got pushed out of her home in Bosnia? I'm like, yeah, it was really terrible. It was during the war. And the guys were like, yeah, that happened to a lot of us in Bosnia. And I'm like, yeah, I really miss her. Oh my God, you guys would get along so well. And I'm like, as if.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, you're dating a Serbian girl who fled during the war? And I'm like, yeah.
Was that true?
Bullshit.
Okay,
no,
you're making all this
bullshit.
shit up.
Yeah, I just know enough Serbian people to like fake this.
How did you think to, like, that's so, like, you're being so quick on your feet?
Yeah. It was
just
kind of
came to
like,
your mind, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this is something that like you can kind of train. And if you can kind of train this, but I also thought, okay, if I tell them everything they want to know, it would be, first of all, that's impossible because they assume that I'm a spy. So if I just deny that I'm a spy angrily, they're going to just get angry and beat me up. If I deny that I'm a spy calmly, they're going to accuse me of being a spy who's like trained to lie about being a spy. If I completely control the conversation and change the subject to something else, that's not going to work on a seasoned interrogator. It's going to work on a drunk ass idiot, which is what these guys were. So I wouldn't like try this if you get arrested by some Kremlin agent who knows what they're doing. If you get arrested by an absolutely moronic drunk buffoon with 2 brain cells, this is a strategy that can work.
What training? You said that there's some training you can do. So what training did you have?
Yeah, I mean, I was learning a lot about social engineering, which is like hackers learn this stuff. And I was really good at this back in the day. It was like, you can tell someone, it's like the act like you belong there kind of strategy of breaking into something, where like the simplest explanation would be something like, if you want to get access to a place, get a hard hat and a high vis vest and just walk in. Like it's so easy, right? But that's kind of like this is like the language equivalent of that, where if you walk in and can I get in here? They're going to be like, no, this is a secure facility. But if you walk in with a high vis clipboard, a high vis vest, and a hard hat, and you go, maintenance closet, and yeah, it's over there. Right? Okay, thank you. And then it's like, oh, like those guys who walk in through big cities and go, I'm checking the fire extinguishers, and you're like, yeah, come in. And meanwhile, that's not a job that someone has. They're looking to see if you have any valuables, and they're going to rob you later.
You mentioned earlier about kind of like feeling like icked out about people or getting worried about people or whatever. I feel like for a lot of the social engineering stuff, the way that it works is people don't realize how by default trusting you are of other people. You super trust other people. Probably, I mean, we need to. We're humans, right? Yeah, we're social creatures.
We function in society.
And people that just plug into that, you can do a lot of really weird things with people if you abuse that.
That's true.
Yeah. I remember just reading about it just like in random stuff for high school, and then obviously watching more stuff as I've gotten older, especially for debates and trying to control those conversations. But like even if you're just like talking to a friend and they're sitting at a stoplight and you're talking like, oh, it's green, and you just like keep talking, they'll go. Like sometimes without even checking the light.
Right,
like, you get somebody to pull under traffic. Yeah, without even thinking about it. Yeah. I don't know if I'm proud or ashamed to say it, but with my 13-year-old son, I have definitely used some of what I've seen. Do you know what JCS is?
No, what is
They're like, they go through a lot of police interrogation videos. The idea of like applying pressure, giving somebody a way out, giving somebody the ability to admit to a lesser thing so that you can build to a greater thing, empathizing with why somebody might, rather than saying like, you killed her, didn't you? Being like, she was really horrible, wasn't she? Because it's really easy to agree with the second one, but you'll never admit the first one. And if you can get them enough on your side and like, she was horrible, like if somebody would have, you know, she probably would have deserved it. And it's like, maybe, yeah. And then eventually, yeah, you can prefer, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
There are so many little conversational things like that where you can build towards, you know, getting what you want out of somebody. The other person doesn't even realize it. And after watching enough of those JCS videos, I'm like, damn. Yeah, because like you said, you've got people that are just like screaming at each other, like asking stupid questions. And then you've got entire police investigations that are built in the interrogation room for just very skilled interlocutors. Yeah,
definitely. And I'm not that level of skill. Like that requires a police officer who does this probably every day with a mentor who does this every day for 20 years, and they learn how to do it. My strategy for these guys was I need to confuse them and keep them away from getting super emotional, angry, because that's when you get your ass beat. Because the other guy got his ass beat because he was like, my dad's an important man, you guys are screwed. And they were like, okay. And I was just like, I know they hate me because I'm American and they think I'm running from the police. What if I'm way more like them than they think, and I'm close to people that are really a lot like them, like my fake Serbian girlfriend who got pushed out of her Bosnian home, even though she didn't exist. And they're like, you're the enemy of the country. And I'm like, here's what I love about living here. And it's like all these things I knew they probably like. The beer is good. The people are so nice, especially even you guys, right? You're just good people, Serbians. And which is true. Serbians are generally like really actually cool. I had plenty of awesome experiences there, but obviously these cops were the exception. And most cops there were actually really shitty. But it was like I had so many things to say about the country that they were not expecting. So when they were like, you're probably here doing this, it would be like, you know what I did the other day? The total opposite of that thing that you're just implying that I did. And it's like, oh, you're trying to take down our regime. You know, I'm thinking about moving here. This is such an awesome place to live. Like, you must hate this place. You guys bombed us. You know, I was 8 when that happened, but I am so glad I came to check this place out because it is totally different than we learned about in the United States. And they were just like, no, you're supposed to get mad and be patriotic American, and then we're supposed to beat your ass and feel like heroes, but now we just feel like dipshits. That was kind of what was going on. And then I was like, hey, I'm feeling really sick because I drank so much. I'm also really thirsty, and there's no water anywhere. And my friend really needs medicine. Look at him because he's like all bleeding and he like can't breathe properly. And they were like, and I think they were kind of like, oh crap, like this guy's in a bad situation. So they left. They were drunk. They left and got in their car and drove off. And they were just like, don't move. And I'm like, of course, where am I going? And I immediately grabbed my friend and we walked to a restaurant. And I remember being like, excuse me, can you call the police, please? But I think what I said to the hostess was, right, with blood all over me and stuff. Because she went... And then she walked away, and I was like, she must be getting menus, right? And then, but what happened was the police showed up, not the same guys, obviously, and not the actual, and not the state security guys, but like the militia, like the regular cops and some traffic cops. And they were just like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm foreign, and I got kidnapped by the police. And they were like, yeah, right. And I was like, black Jeep, state security, said this, this, and this. And then they were like, oh, that sounds real. And I remember being in the back of the police car and this young guy who has like an MP5 or whatever, like aimed in my general direction, is like, you fucking junkie idiot, you guys. And I was like, no, I got kidnapped by the police. Here's what happened. And I remember he goes, oh man, I'm really sorry. That's terrible. That should not happen. You know, I hate that about this place. And he's like, you know, during the war,
I hate it when it happens.
He's like, during the war, that happens to us too. He's like, it happens to Serbian people too. He's like, you know, it's not just Americans. He's like, they do this stuff to us too. It's absolutely awful. And I was just thinking, like, they do this to you too. You're a cop here, man. Like, what?
How does this, I feel like this would be really bad PR for your country, and two, that you would get in a lot of trouble with your government because you'd probably get in a lot of trouble with America if you were doing stuff like this to American citizens. Is this just not a concern, or what?
Well, Serbia is not exactly a super close ally of the United States. You know, they were kind of on the outs with those folks after NATO bombed them.
But you probably also don't want to be capturing American citizens and stuff.
Right.
I will also say, as a close by country, I had an ex that was on a bus and ended up taking a wrong turn, and she had to get a ride back in Croatia. and she had an insane story where she got cops to give her a ride back basically, but they ended up taking her to like a police station with a couple other tourist people, and they were just like showing them their guns and drinking and just like goofing. It wasn't like a crazy kidnapping.
Wow.
Well, it was kidnapping, but they were just like goofing off and having fun or whatever. And then eventually she just like got a ride back to the city, and I was like, okay, that sounds really crazy.
That does sound somewhat accurate, though. I mean, like, it's a little bit, I won't say it's lawless, especially in Belgrade or Novi Sad where I was, but like, yeah, stuff like that happens in the former Yugoslavia. This is Albania, this is Kosovo, where I got a taxi driver. He spoke Albanian and German. I speak German. And so my friend and I were traveling through Kosovo, and we're kind of like walking / taking buses. And we told we're like, okay, our bus leaves in 2 hours. Let's get some Kosovo Liberation Army t-shirts and souvenirs, because this is like a group that fought the Serbs and is like a local militia, and they're kind of heroes to these people. And I was like, this would be like really cool swag that most people have never seen. So let's grab some t-shirts. So we told the taxi driver, hey, we want some KLA stuff. Where can we go? Thinking he's going to take us to like a street vendor that has a bunch of this stuff. He drives us to the KLA's camp in the middle of whatever, like Pech, Kosovo. And I'm like, and the guy's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, there's tourists. They want to check it out. And I'm like, he's like, give me your passports. What do you do? Student. And he's like, take the passports. He's like, come inside. So we go inside with the taxi drivers with us. I feel like, okay, they're probably not going to kill us because our taxi driver's here with us. And he's like, seems totally fine. And my friend goes, we're missing this bus, aren't we? And I was like, yeah, but it's going to be worth it, I hope. This is pre-kidnapping in Serbia, by the way. And I'm like, cool. So these KLA guys start showing us photos, and they're like, yeah, this is our friend who died in the war. Like, these are our other comrades, whatever. And then they were like, we're like really kind of, we got the whole tour of the whole camp, and like they were really super friendly, but it was a little bit dark and sad. And then they could tell we were kind of like bummed, and they were like, hey, do you guys want to go shooting? And we're like, yeah, let's go shooting. So they load up these like AK-47s and put targets up, and we're just like blasting these things. And I was like, this is so much better than a crappy rocky bus ride to another part of Kosovo. I'm so glad we missed our bus. So stuff like that kind of happens there. It's not like, oh, you need to fill out the proper forms. It's like, let's go shoot these guns that we confiscated from these drug dealers. Like, okay, fine. So it wouldn't surprise me that the cops were like, oh, foreigners? Oh, we got to show them the guns, guys. We got to show them the guns. They're going to love the guns.
Kind of like loosely related. I remember we were on a trip in Aruba, and there's like a tours that you can do in Aruba where on one of these things, you can like climb down, I'm going to say ladder. That's a very exaggerated, because it's just like little planks of wood that are somehow nailed into these rocks. You climb down, and then you walk on these like huge rocks. And to the left, if you fall, you're in the ocean. And then to the right, if you fall, you're probably going to be stuck in this crevice and die forever, because there's like a mountain that comes here.
Yeah, I'll choose ocean.
Yeah, and it's funny kind of like walking along this area, kind of in what you said, that like there's no forms to fill out, where I'm like, in the United States of America, there would be fences everywhere.
Right.
This is a little bit wild that we're just like walking, and if I take a wrong step, I'm going to die. Yeah, it's a very non-American experience.
I'm too old for that stuff now, right? Like now my sense of adventure is like, I'm going to try that new restaurant. I don't know, man. Pacific Catch is sounding pretty good. No, let's go wild and try the new Mexican place. That's my sense of adventure now. I've calmed down quite a bit. So eventually we got arrested by those other cops, right? And they took us to the police station, and they were like, to their credit, really apologetic, because it was very clear that we were telling the truth. They really initially thought, because the ambulance driver was like, these guys are just like on drugs. What are you doing? But once we were like, black Jeep, plate had a weird thing on it, and then it was this Mitsubishi style of Jeep, tinted windows. They had a gun in the back. This is it was a Zastava made in Yugoslavia, and then they had this and did it, and they were just like, yeah, that's not information that you can find if you are not involved with this. And it's like, okay, this guy's totally got taken by state security.
And so then I'm super confused. So the state security kidnapped you, and they could wave away police, but then the police could help you afterwards. Like, what were the police able to do if the state security could just like wave?
As it turns out, absolutely nothing. Okay. What they did was they were like, I'm going to investigate this and figure out what happened. And they got those guys to give us our stuff back that they had stolen by dropping it off at the police station. I didn't go to the police station to get it. My friend did, and he saw them. So I think
that would be crazy.
It was crazy. And they were like, hey, Milan, what's going on, buddy? I got your phone and your hat and your watch. Oh, I don't have your watch. And he stole my watch. It was crap. It was Fossil or something. But it was like, come on, man. Yeah. And they like kept one of my shirts or something. And so, it was just like they could get our stuff back by being like, what the hell, guys? And then we went to the U.S. Embassy, and the U.S. Embassy was like, yikes, this sounds legit. But they're like, I remember this is, you think like, oh, the diplomats are on it. That's not how this works at all. They were really like upset for us, and they were like, oh man. But I remember the security guy came in and goes, here's the thing. It's really hard for us to get stuff done here. You're alive. They don't have anything super valuable of yours. We're not going to do anything about it. And we're not even going to like bring this up. They already know about it. If you go to the press, we're not going to help you at all. So don't do that because it's going to just make our job harder. And again, you're alive. So I recommend you just leave. And I was like, wow, okay. And then I was working there. So later I went back to the embassy again. And they were like, we have a letter for you that you can't have that you can read. And it was a letter from the foreign minister of Serbia apologizing for the events that took place. And I was like, oh, this is such a relief. And he's like, yeah, you can't bring that out of here. This is mine. I'm like, but it has my name on it. Can I have a copy? And they were like, absolutely not. No. Because they were just kind of, and then the story in the newspaper was 2 guys from a potato chip factory abducted 2 tourists and lied and said they were police. And I was just like, totally had government stuff in the government vehicle, but okay. And then weeks later, another thing came out that was like, retraction. Turns out the whole thing was just made up. None of it ever happened. It turned out to just be a complete lie. And I was like, that's funny because a complete lie, but those guys were there and they went to the police and we have police reports. And then, like, that's interesting. But I think what happened was they were just kind of like, yeah, we don't like, to your point, we don't have bad stuff happening like that to foreigners. That's not the story we want to say. And the U.S. Embassy was just kind of like, we're not going to do anything about this. So they were like, oh, let's just erase this.